The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we're going to share the latest in the Sebastian Driussi saga and all of the potential outcomes of that. We'll cover the Brandon Vazquez introductory press conference and ask Jeremiah if Vazquez is as handsome in person as has been reported by others. We'll give some scouting reports on two potential new signings in Uzuni and Dubersarsky, and there's a lot more that I could say right now, but I think I should stop. We're also going to be joined by away day travel guru Seth Rau, who will talk to us about the 2025 Austin FC schedule. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and what a week, man. And I will start by answering the question off the top. Brandon Vazquez is a very handsome man, and he looks very well moisturized. Like, the skin of a baby. And I think it's probably the most impressive thing about him, in addition to being very tall and very attractive. So 10-10 for him as far as he's really good he was really, really good about like meeting people and work in the room and thanking everybody who was there. So great press conference performance by him. And I want to follow up by asking you, so today we had the first media availability on the sporting side of things because today was the first official day of practice, and you had the chance to go to watch the media availability, which was before practice, right?
That's right. Yeah, they had a quick media availability before training and then let us watch the first 15 minutes of training, which is really just like some warm-up and drills, so not a lot of insight there. But we did get to see the players. We could see into the window them doing their weightlifting, and so that was kind of interesting. But then they all walked out and walked past us. We got to see all the fresh new haircuts and all of that, and spotted some new faces. And me and Moises from Verdi All Day were sitting there like, wait, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And I think we figured it all out except for one. So it's like the two draft picks, some of the Efecito guys, like the two center backs from Efecito, and like some other guys that are there filling in the gaps. And then there was one goalkeeper, Cam from Austin FC Comms, told us that he is a trialist. His name is Blake Gillingham from Creighton University. Would likely be a trialist for Austin FC 2, but was there training with the first team as just like the fourth keeper in the lot. So it all in all, like very much first day of school vibes. And I think Nico in his part of the media availability said that exact phrase, like a lot of energy, really good vibes, even though we're going to get into this Sebastian Driussi stuff. It seemed like the mood was high and people were excited to be there.
That's awesome. So did you who else did you get insights from today during that? Like who was available to actually answer questions from the media? And then did you have any high points that you want to get into? They're sort of outside of the main stories of the week that you want to talk about.
So it was announced in the invite that it would be Nico Estevez and Brendan Heinzike. We also got a surprise announcement from Rodolfo Borrell, which I think we'll get into in a bit when we're talking about Sebastian Driussi. But I think we can talk about this more on future shows when we have a less busy show. But I think Nico's main point was that there's a question about captaincy, and he just essentially said, we have no captain. Everyone's in contention. And then same for starting 11, a question about like who he sees as his starters and all of that. And he's like, nobody. It's all up for grabs at this point. So we're here to learn about the players, learn as much as we can, and then start to build an identity as a team. And that was kind of his main message. There's something about Brendan Heinzike, a tactical thing that I want to talk about. I don't think we have time today, so we'll save that for another show. But there was something he said that was interesting that I would like to dig into.
Okay, so let's get into the big news of the week, that being Sebastian Driussi out, which rumors have been persistent on this, but over the last few days, there's been a lot of leaks, a lot of stories, a lot of a lot of smoke from now both more than one place in Argentina and here in Austin. So for the people that aren't crazy followers, which is funny because I got to talk to my boss today, who is a casual fan. Not a casual fan. He's a fan, probably goes to 12 games a year, listens to some shows, and he's like, what are you, this Driussi thing? I have no idea what you're saying. So I think, among the not terminally online kind of normie world, this whole thing is new and crazy information.
Yeah, the last week it feels like it's changed course, or big developments have come out at least twice a day. And so as of last week, we talked about on last week's show that, okay, reports that River wants Driussi, and we were like, of course they do. They always do. They can't afford him, so this isn't real. But by the time last week's show recorded, we were like, okay, no, this is real. There's something here, and this might be imminent. No deal has been done, but still lots and lots of rumors, reports, leaks, whatever you want to call them, coming out. So let's maybe go through the timeline of the last week or so and kind of lead up to where we are now. And then at the end of that, I want to talk about what the possible outcomes are. So starting middle of last week, all signs are pointing to Driussi is probably not going to come to camp on Saturday. All the Austin FC players were set to report on Saturday. It looks like he was not moving from Buenos Aires. There's a report from Argentina saying, from a reporter that covers River, saying that Austin FC had given permission to Driussi to not report to camp and to stay in Argentina. Very next day, Tom Bogert reports that Driussi did in fact not have permission and that Austin FC will be fining him. Then not long after that, reports that a $7 million bid was rejected by Austin. Next day, Tom Bogert reports that another Argentinian club, Estudiantes, is willing to meet Austin FC's asking price. And then reports after that out of Argentina saying like, no, Driussi would never consider Estudiantes. It's only River. So that's kind of where we're at this point. I think the latest is that River will come back with another bid. I've seen 9 million. I've seen 8 million. We'll see if that actually happens and if there's more news this week. But I think one thing that I would like to dig into and talk about a bit more is the fact that whenever a piece of news came out, there was always something from the US, from Bogert mostly, saying like, actually, it's the opposite of what they said. And this reads to me that Austin FC is trying to control this narrative. This is a club and a front office that for most of its existence has been pretty silent on almost everything that they weren't forced to talk about. That's not what's been happening this week. Somebody is talking to somebody, and it very much feels like to me that the Austin camp is seeing that, okay, this guy's saying Driussi had permission to stay in Argentina. Not true. And you see Rodo come out at the press conference today, and the thing that I hinted at earlier. So all he did was walk out and said, I'm going to make a statement. I will not be taking any questions. And he said that Sebastian Driussi is not here. He was not given permission to not be here. We reported him to the league on Saturday when he didn't show up. We reported him to the league on Sunday when he didn't show up. And if he doesn't show up today, we're going to report him to the league. That's all I have to say. I'll see you later. And so that, along with the report that this bid gets rejected by Austin FC, next day, Estudiantes are interested and they're going to pay the full price. Who knows if that's even real? And I imagine Sebastian Driussi would not sign a contract with Estudiantes. Like, his whole aim here seems to be to play for River. It's not just to leave Austin, it's to go to River. And the fact that even came out, it very much feels like Rodolfo Borrell and the Austin camp are playing hardball here, and they're not going to stand idly by as River tries to take their designated player. They're going to try to get their money out of him.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you could take out of it. And you talked about the way that Austin approached things before and the way that it does now, and Borrell being the obvious change, right? Because like the ownership's still the same. We've got a new sporting director, and he does not seem to be interested in fooling around. And this also adds a lot of color to the comment when somebody asked about whether Brendan Vazquez would be playing next to Sebastian Driussi in training at the press conference on Monday. Burrell's like, I'm not talking about that. We're here to talk about this player and nothing else. And a lot of people read into it that these rumors about Driussi not showing up might be true, and those did turn out to be true. You just mentioned that he specifically said he wasn't given permission. It was reported to the league Saturday, was reported to the league yesterday, and was reported to the league today. Maybe this is something that you posted on Blue Sky and on Twitter. What does that mean? Before we get into the possible outcomes, I think it's important to set the context for how we arrive at those outcomes. So talk about what you found in, I think this is in the CBA, about what happens to a player if they don't show up and the club's reporting it to the league, and what the club and the league can do in terms of a holdout, which is basically what we have right now.
Yeah, so it's this is in the MLS collective bargaining agreement. There's some language in there about a failure to appear, and there's fines based on salary amounts. And I think the highest bracket is like $750K and above, which Sebastian Driussi makes $6.7 million.
He's got that
year.
covered. Yeah.
And so the base fine there is $1,000 per day. And so he could essentially sit out for a whole year and not even notice it in his bank account, really. But there are there's language in the CBA that allows for like bigger action to take place if needed, or if the league feels like it's warranted. So, and leading up to like suspension without pay, and then termination of a contract even. So those are some of the potential outcomes that we'll get into here in a second. But just going back to kind of Austin trying to control the narrative, I think something that happened at the media availability today felt very representative of Burrell's posture towards this whole scenario. So it was a surprise. We did not know he was going to come out and make a statement. He comes out. Folks who listen to this show and pay attention to Austin FC, if you've watched any of the press conferences, either live or on replay, you'll be familiar with Jorge Iturralde, who covers the team in Spanish. He's at most press conferences. I think it's fair and diplomatic for me to say that Jorge is a bit of a intentional pot stirrer at times, and him and Burrell have gotten into like sparring matches almost every time every time Burrell has been available to the media, him and Jorge have gotten into it. Burrell walks out of the training ground today into where we were set up, immediately starts chirping at Jorge, doesn't stop until he gets in front of the cameras, stops talking to Jorge, gives his statement, thanks everybody, starts walking back into the training ground, and is chirping at Jorge the whole time. And then it gets a little bit heated at one point, and he's got a finger in the air shaking him. You see comm staff maybe drifting into the space in between the two men just in case. And it got a little bit heated for a second. But all that to say, Burrell seems like he's a man on a mission right now. And we'll get into a bit more during the Vazquez press conference as well. Just like, it seems like he's gone through a lot. He's in his feelings a little bit, but also very determined to get what he wants at this point in time.
Well, let's go through the possible outcomes now. So we've set them up. So I guess let's start with, I don't know, where do you want to go? You want to go like best to worst, most likely to least likely? How do you want to set these up?
I'll go best. Let's say, best possible outcome to worst possible outcome. And there's of course gray area in between these, but I'm hitting big bullet points here. So let's start at the top. So best possible outcome at this point is that Austin playing hardball works, and River ends up paying more than they wanted to, and frankly, maybe more than what Sebastian Driussi is worth. That's best possible outcome at this point. I'd say next down from that is River doesn't really budge, and Austin is forced to maybe take a little less than they wanted. But even then, that seems like it's going to be in the range of like 6 to 8 million is less than what they wanted. If you ask me, that feels like a pretty good deal still. Next from there is, say River really doesn't budge, and Austin ends up, this goes on for a few more weeks. Austin really wants to get the deal done. They want to bring in a replacement, and they just kind of have to fold and take a low ball offer, which is I don't know, maybe that ends up being $4 to $6 million or something like that.
So I want to stop on that one. That one seems less likely than the ones above it, and it seems less likely than a couple of the ones after it in terms of how you ranked them best to worst. I'm interested if you think about that. Just talk about how dedicated Burrell is to sort of being the boss and looking at this move in the context of all the other moves he's going to make. I feel like that one is less likely than deal falls through and Driussi has to come back and play for Austin. Like I don't think Burrell takes a low ball offer.
I think you're right, which is part of what I'm concerned about and leads me into the back half of this list, which are the worst outcomes.
Right.
And I think you're exactly right that the low ball offer, it is a possibility, but it doesn't seem as likely as some of these others, including the most catastrophic of outcomes. So yeah, the one you just mentioned, the deal falls through. Driussi just has to come back and play for Austin FC. I mean, this kind of thing is not new in world soccer. Like, this is a trope, like players trying to force moves, refusing to train, doing whatever. And we'll actually get into that with another player later on in this show, but it's not new. This happens. And sometimes the player ends up coming back to the team and having to play for that team. And sometimes it turns out okay. I think he's going to have a long way to go with fans at this point if he does come back, but there have been worse scenarios for players in regard to their relationship with fans. And so it wouldn't be ideal, but I could see it happening. The next thing that might happen is the deal falls through and they decide on a mutual termination of his contract. I think this one could happen if it stretches on and on and on, and the transfer window's closed, Argentina's transfer window's closed, and there's still no deal in sight. Austin's tired of it. They just want to be able to sign a replacement. They just say, okay, let's tear it up. We can sign a replacement now and move on with our lives. We're not getting any money for him, but we can still replace him at that point, which leads to the absolute worst possible outcome is the deal falls through and Driussi refuses to come back anyway. In that scenario, it would be like, okay, Austin's not wanting to cut their losses, not willing to terminate the contract, but he's still on our books. He's still taking up a DP spot. We can't replace him until that's not true. And so we're just, once again, have a third DP that's not playing for us, which has become, it would be the third or fourth time that's been true for Austin FC. And it would be a terrible outcome to happen again this year, in a year that's supposed to be rebuilding, supposed to be a fresh start, to have this same old demon come back and haunt us.
Yeah, and this is the 2023 Emmanuel Reynoso deal right there, where he gets suspended. He eventually came back, right? But he sat out for at least a couple months from Minnesota.
Yeah,
and got docked game pay because the deal didn't go through that he wanted, and he refused to come back. Obviously, Driussi's a less terrible person than Reynoso because there were some other mitigating factors. But the other odd part of that is not having a person who was detrimental to the locker room actually made Minnesota play better for a little while.
Yeah.
In that scenario, if you're looking for the bright side of not having your most talented, expensive player on the field. So, yeah, I agree. It will be very interesting to see how that shakes out. It feels like, to me, something that won't necessarily drag on a long time. But I guess we'll know in the coming days whether it's going to be a thing or not.
Yeah, reports out of Argentina as late as, I think, like 5 or 6 p.m. today on Monday were that River was planning to put in a bid for $8 million. Just reading between the lines, that still probably feels like it's lower than what Austin are wanting. So there's a good chance, if that number is right, that Austin rejects it again, and this drags on for another week or another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks. I hope that's not the case. I hope it would be great if we could get this done this week and Austin could move on with their lives, start to bring in the replacement, and start planning for this season. But there's a real possibility that that's not going to be the case.
Well, all right, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we're going to talk. We'll follow up on the one guy that also did bring in, again, Brendan Vazquez, who we've touched on. I went to that press conference last week. I said on Tuesday. And then we'll also cover a couple of rumor players and some other more Austin FC news.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to fef.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fef.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again, Amplify Credit Union. And to learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. We're going to talk about some player links. Some of them more than rumors at this point, maybe are done deals. But first, let's talk about Brandon Vazquez's introductory press conference. As you said, you were there. He was as handsome in person as expected. What are some of the other highlights and happenings from that presser?
He also wore a sick hoodie that I think everybody wants, which you can find available at the Verde store. It's kind of expensive. I'm hoping he got at least an employee discount on that when he got his, if not more. But
I love this new marketing method from Austin FC of just like putting new unavailable merch on new signings to showcase it.
So everybody wanted. Yeah, and the mood was great. I think I mentioned this maybe in a text group or whatever. Like, as far as the vibes have gone since 2022, I've never seen like a more positive room. So the way it was set up was it's in the Q2 Field Club, where the press room is right off sort of the edge of that, but they had the doors open. So there was like the media was assembled in the room with the press conference tables, and they had this mix of like club staff and sponsors and season ticket holders kind of out in the club area, standing around and watching or sitting around and watching what was going on. And so it was a great vibe. Like Rodo and Vazquez, after the press conference was over, walked around and shook hands with everybody in the room. I think as far as what he said, he's super personable. He answered a lot of questions in Spanish. I appreciated that it was like the level of Spanish that I can understand, because at one point he's like trying to think of a word. He's like, "Como se dice?" Well, and he was like trying to come up with it. I was like, "Yes, thank you, Brandon." I get this one. It's a lot of it were just sportsy answers. Real positive, here to support the team and work hard and do my best. And I'm looking forward to scoring goals. We asked about his off-ball movement and whether that was something that was natural or something he worked on. He talked about, I think it was learning from his dad.
Yeah,
I remember right.
Him and his dad would watch film since he was a kid, which is cool to know that I it's a thing that I figured was true, but it's cool to hear him say like, no, I worked on this. This isn't just an accident.
Yeah, and recognize it like at a young age with his dad. That's a skill that he could acquire that would be added to the team. One of the interesting things that I got out of it that I don't think we've heard anywhere else was just the timing. He talked about being in Austin in October for the when they were training with the U.S. national team, and kind of jokingly talked about how great the facilities were at St. David's Performance Center, and how he's like, man, maybe I should play here sometime because these facilities are so great. And I think was the Rodo presser at the end of the year last year at the same time? I feel like we were out at St. David's Performance Center when the U.S. national team was there. So I think it was around the same time.
Yeah, that might be right. And I remember going out to an Austin FC 2 game and Pochettino's staff being out there watching the game and seeing Nico Estevez there and be like, oh, that's weird. Nico Estevez is here. And then within a couple of weeks, we start getting the Nico Estevez links. And little did we know, that is also when Austin FC contacted Brandon Vazquez's camp because he said a couple of weeks after he left Austin and said to himself, maybe it would be nice to play here one day. He gets a text from his agent and said, "Hey, Austin's interested. Let's look into it."
So that was a neat little anecdote. I think everything from him was really positive. But there's a moment near the end of this press conference where this is not something I expected to see at all. But it's a moment at the end of the press conference, like Rodolfo Borrell gets emotional during the last question and talks about what a difficult deal it was. How hard it is to get these kind of things on the line. He kind of opened and closed the press conference by thanking Anthony Precourt, who was in the room, and the ownership partners. And then he also specifically thanked Vazquez's agent, who's also there in the front row, and looked at him. And then the presser basically ends with Borrell like shedding tears and Brendan Vazquez patting him on the arm to like let him know it'll all be okay, which is not what I expected to see.
Yeah, it's I wasn't there in person, but even watching it on video, it was a striking tone that was said, but kind of moving at the same time. But it really seemed like Borrell was going through it in the moment. We actually were told by a source after the fact that maybe some insight into why he was so emotional, but we were told that this deal was done on December 28th. And so it gets announced like January 3rd or 4th or something like that. Is that right?
Around then, yeah.
So there's several days where it was in limbo. And what we were told is that this was not just due to complications in negotiating with Monterrey, but that MLS was holding it up due to discovery list allocation, whatever, one of these weird things, that there were some MLS complications that they were kind of putting the brakes or putting a block in front of stopping it, which is extremely frustrating. Just, we talk about, okay, there's progress being made. They're loosening up the spending, but it's not as fast as we want. This is a situation where it's like, what are we doing? Like, if you're not going to make it as easy as possible for a guy like Brandon Vazquez to come back into this league, what are we doing here? And so it's really frustrating to hear that is part of why this got held up and potentially almost didn't happen. And then it probably plays into the fact as to why Rodolfo Borrell was so emotional and why he went out of his way to thank Brandon Vazquez's agent twice during a press conference, that doesn't happen. Like, I've never even thought about a player's agent in most of these things. And the fact that he was there and gets thanked twice by the sporting director, that's significant.
Yeah, and the only time you ever hear about an agent is negative, right? No sporting director ever says any good things about anybody's agent. Which reminds me, when we were talking about the high-profile signing, one of the other things that Rodo, who's been in a mood, he chose to throw shade at. I guess probably Jurgen Klinsmann, but also Berhalter a little bit, because when people they asked Brandon about his potential for reconnecting with the national team. Brandon talked about like, well, I'm going to play, I'm going to score goals, and that's going to lead to me playing for teams. And then Rodo decided to elaborate on that by saying, previous U.S. coaches have wanted to say that people have to be in Europe or playing at the highest level of competition. But now it's a thing where like people need to be playing and be successful, which I believe is Pochettino's goal. So like playing in MLS shouldn't be a strike against a player if he's doing well, and how that showed that both the team and the league were trying to be more ambitious about the kind of players they brought in, which I thought was just sort of an interesting side point for something he decided to throw in unprompted.
Yeah, and I think this wasn't said on mic, but I think maybe did Vazquez tell someone else there in the room? I can't remember how this got reported or where it came from, but Vazquez was invited to the U.S. January camp and turned it down because of this recent move. Which that's a common thing in soccer. It's like a player's had a recent move. They want them to go get integrated into their new team because January camp isn't that's not the goal. The goal is 2026. And what's best for Brandon Vazquez and for the national team is if Brandon Vazquez can come and get integrated in Austin and start scoring goals for Austin, then call him up in the summer, call him up in the fall as we're playing real games that matter. But it's still really encouraging to see that he is in the plans. He did get called up, but they were also respected kind of his wishes and his well-being enough to say it's actually better for you to stay in Austin, get integrated, get firing with your new team. We'll see you later in the year.
Yeah, before we move on from this point, just to this topic, just to cover it, tie it back to the one before, the league can be a complicating factor in all deals, and so I think all of us should be aware of that when it comes to Sebastian Driussi. Thing we talk about on the top is there like things that Austin FC may want to do or not do that Major League Soccer, because they're a party to every contract, is going to have a voice in, which complicates every move, especially high-profile moves, both in and out of the league and out of the country.
All right, let's get into some other player links. The first one being Myrto Uzuni. This is a 29-year-old Albanian forward currently at Granada, who's playing in Spain in La Liga 2, which is the Spanish second division. So he's in an interesting situation, not entirely dissimilar, but also not entirely similar to the situation that Driussi is in at the moment. So he's currently training on his own, refusing to play. I think he missed a game on Friday because he is quote unquote injured. Emphasis on the scare quotes there. But the reports out of Spain are that Uzuni wants more money. He's their best player by far, has been for a few seasons now. He wants more money. While he was bringing up his concerns about wanting more money, Austin comes calling and offers him more money. And the reports are, again, grain of salt. We don't know how much of this is agents kind of priming the pump and all of this. But the reports are that Austin would be willing to double his current salary. And so at the moment, he is decided to be quote unquote injured and not train or play with the team until Granada decides to pay him more money or sell him to another team who is willing to pay him more money. Well, in a bit, we'll get into what kind of player he is, how he would fit into an Austin team. First, I wanted to talk about just like that scenario and like, how do we feel about this tactic? We're sitting here kind of roasting Driussi for the tactic. How do we feel about it maybe benefiting us in the long run?
I mean, I'm more than willing to be a hypocrite about this situation here. I mean, I think it's a common situation in sports, and it's one of these. I mean, it's no matter what sport you're familiar with, it's like very common in American sports too, right? Where a guy wants to go somewhere else, and they hold out, and then the fans of the team that he's playing for at the time all hate him, and the fans of the team that he wants to go to are like, yeah, bring him in. So I don't know. I'm okay. I think we should all recognize these situations are very similar, despite the specific wording of it. And either you're okay with players acting like this, or you're not. And if you're okay with it, which I am, then I'm fine with both these going on.
I would like to point out some of the differences here, though. So
okay,
I try to lean towards the pro labor stance in these takes. I grew up in small town working class West Texas, and I heard so many times that like, oh, it's a crime that these athletes make so much money. And is it weird and maybe bad for society that athletes make so much money? Yeah, probably. But somebody's making the money, and if anybody's making the money, it should be the athletes. Same with like college stuff and NIL. Like, is it weird that college athletes are getting paid to play sports? Yeah, it's a little weird, but it's not like the money's not there and they're demanding it. The money is there and they were not getting paid any of it. So that's my stance on this in general, is that if there's money to be made, the athletes should be making it, and they should try to maximize their earning in their very short careers. In Driussi's situation, he is currently on the biggest contract he will ever get, and a contract that is much, much larger than most players would ever dream of. Uzuni is probably making pretty good money, but he knows that at this point in his career, he's 29 years old, so this is his last shot at a big contract, and he is in prime position to try to force his way into that contract. he might be using some kind of shady tactics to get there, but I have a bit more sympathy for a player in his scenario than I do in a player in Driussi's scenario. Not to say it is still kind of a shady tactic, but I think there are some shades of gray here.
Okay, I will be willing to accept that. So maybe you've seen some of him as a player. So talk about him as a player and kind of what player he is and like why it might make sense or why it might not make sense. Before I forget, did you see this story about how he's like afraid to fly?
No.
Oh. Yeah, I did see this. So that feels like that may be a point against him because it may be tough to do in the States.
Are you sure you want to come to MLS, buddy?
Yeah, exactly. But go ahead. So, yeah, ignoring that goofy online rumor that may or not be true, why don't you go ahead and get into him as a player and what we might think?
Yeah, so the part that makes sense about him is that the dude scores goals. He went to Granada in, I think, 2021, was only there half a season, didn't get a ton of minutes. His first full season, they had been relegated. They're playing in La Liga 2. He scored 23 goals and had 6 assists in the second division. They were promoted that year. In La Liga, he got 11 goals and 1 assist. They got relegated again. And so far this season, in half of a season, he has 14 goals and 1 assist in 15 starts. So he is at a crazy clip right now with his scoring. Yeah, the second division, you can say, okay, he had a fluke year in the second division, but it's not a fluke when he's done it. 23 goals in the second division, 11 goals in the first division, and then on pace to score close to 30 goals in the second division again. Like, that's quality and consistent quality. The part that doesn't make sense is, despite what it might say on his Transfermarkt and FBref pages, those all say that he's a left winger. I've watched some tape on him. I've dug into the last few years of him playing. He plays as a striker for Granada and has always played as a striker for Granada. So that part is a little confusing to me. We talked about, if Driussi goes out, bringing in a true creative playmaker, like an attacking midfielder, would probably make a lot of sense. This is not that. If we brought this guy in, it would most likely be a front three of Uzuni, Vazquez, and Bukhari, are 3 DPs all across the front line, which you could say, okay, goal scorers score goals. That's great. But if we don't have any midfielders behind them providing service, I don't know what that looks like, and is a little perplexing and has me just like, what is this team going to look like? What's the plan if this is the guy they're going to bring in to replace our DP attacking midfielder? They're not going more midfielder. They're going more forward with this signing if this is the guy that they bring in.
So what do we think? I mean, is this a reality or is this just
Tom Bogert said that this link is real. So
okay.
I think when this first came out, there's a lot of people saying like, maybe this was our backup for Vazquez if that deal fell through, and maybe he's still just using, like, Uzuni's using this for contract negotiations, but the offer's not really there anymore. That is a legitimate possibility.
I said that some people is me. That's what I thought about it too. Is it seemed like, just like we've had those other moves before where, you know, Ruben Gabrielson was the backup for signing the center back we have now. That's
Väisänen.
Yeah, we've heard that before. Like Ruben Gabrielson, the backup for Väisänen. I think the guy in the first year that had the C4 deal that played like 6 games. Washington Caruso was kind of a backup for Driussi. So like, we've seen this like as a aspect of when you're trying to make multiple deals at the same time. Sometimes, you know, things happen and things don't, which seems like maybe the logical case.
The fact that Bogert reported on it like well after we signed Vazquez makes me think that there could still be a link here, but it's also a possibility that him and his camp are just using that link as a way to get him a bigger contract. Let's say this guy is going to be the Driussi replacement. My theory is I'm trying to think of a way to fit this guy into the puzzle with what we have now. And it's a way that like you could potentially fit Sebastian Driussi into the puzzle as well. And that would be an attacking shape of 3-4-3, having Vazquez in the middle, Bukhari on the right, and then Uzuni, or potentially Sebastian Driussi as a nominal left winger, but playing a bit tucked in that inside channel. And that leaves room for someone like Guilherme Biru to overlap and get involved in the attack there on that side. And then have Uzuni / Driussi play a bit more tucked in. They can play as a forward, but then also drop into midfield and kind of play link up in that role as well. That's one theory as to how this could work, but I genuinely have no idea. And if that is true, I still would have concerns about not having a more creative player in the midfield behind them. And we still don't have that player. Like, he's not on the team right now.
Yeah, and they can't add that at that point. Well, let's go on to the quite likely move that we're going to get for Austin soon. Another midfielder, not the attacking creative midfielder, but another D-mid. And I will let you pronounce his name too.
Yeah, this is Nicolas Dubersarsky, which I don't know the origin of that name, but he is Argentinian. So you just say it how it looks, but with a Spanish accent, essentially. This was reported as a strong link by the Argentinian Tom Bogert, CL Merlo. I think as recent as Sunday, he was saying like negotiations are happening. I expect this to get done. As of a couple of hours ago, time of recording, so Monday evening, Merlo is now saying that this deal is done. So I would not be surprised to see green smoke on Tuesday and this get announced soon. The reports are that Austin made a preliminary bid that was rejected and then bid again. And these reports are saying that it's going to be a $3 million transfer fee. So a pretty hefty sum for this guy. It's such a young player. This smells to me like a U22 signing. So we've talked about how transfer fees get factored into the cap hit of a player and either could push them into TAM category or make it impossible for them to be TAM and pushes them into DP territory. For a U22 signing, you can spend whatever you want on a transfer fee, and that doesn't get factored in. All that matters is that they make below the senior maximum budget charge, which this year is going to be $743,000, which a kid this young, 20 years old from Argentina, he's not going to demand that much money. So if this happens, and it seems like it's going to happen, I'm 99% sure this is going to be a U22 signing for Austin. And we've got those spots to use. I'm excited they're swinging big on it if this is the case.
Yeah, and can you talk more about why that swinging big on deals like this is so great? It's because no matter what we pay him, as long as it's below that threshold, what does he count? 175,000 against the cap?
I think there's like an age delineation, and I think it's 150K for below X age and 200K or 250 for above that age. This he turned 20 in December, and so he would be the lower one. I believe his cap hit would be 150K. Still takes up a senior roster spot, but only 150K of salary budget space.
Yeah, so that'd be a great deal for anybody that's contributing. That is such a good deal. And I mean, these are hard spots. Like, nobody's really figured out U22s yet, but from the talent and the fee, it seems like this would be a really good addition for the club. So maybe we talked about what he might cost, but you've watched his highlight reel. So what do you see out of him?
Yeah, I watched his highlight reel and then went into Y Scout and actually watched some just like boring game footage as well, because I like to balance those two. The highlight reel was telling, though, because oftentimes it'll be a center back or whatever, a guy who doesn't score a bunch of goals, and the first 2 minutes of their highlight reel is them scoring goals. This guy's highlight reel, the first 5 to 10 plays are tackles. This dude is a defensive, hard-nosed defensive midfielder. And so 6'2", good range for his size, can cover ground fairly well, and just eats space, puts in hard tackles. And then the only different thing I saw on this highlight reel was it was either a hard tackle or a hard tackle, and then he stood up with the ball at his feet and played a pass forward. And so that's the kind of player he is. One thing that stood out to me, both in like the highlight reel and then just like kind of the boring Y Scout game footage is his composure. These are games from 2024. He was 19 years old. This is his first top flight season. He'd been playing lower level stuff until that point. So first top flight season, he starts 21 games for, this is, I don't think we said his club, Instituto, who finished middle of the table in the last season. Starts 21 games. If you get on FBref and sort through their defensive stats, he is either top or among the top few in all of their defensive stats as a midfielder. And just to see a guy carry himself like that on the field, to play this big of a role for this team in the Argentinian league, which is not a small league, it's really impressive. And I watched a bunch of footage of Rodney, and we played that interview with Joe Lowry over Christmas, and listening back to myself there, I didn't sound like I was completely sold on Rodney. I was like, I don't think I trusted myself. It's like, maybe they see something in him that I don't. I have a bit more trust in my own eye at this point, and I like this kid. Like, is he a guaranteed home run? No, these types of signings never are. Is he a guaranteed starter? I don't think so. I don't think he walks into the lineup. But to have a guy with this much upside that you can bring into a specific kind of game or in a specific part of the game to do a very specific job, like a guy this composed at such a young age and with this kind of skill set, I really like this signing.
Yeah, and I think this is a place where we could talk about this roster. If you think about Austin FC and the way it's constructed now, in a position that if he comes in is largely filled out, having a guy like Ilie, who is more of like a deep-lying playmaking 6, who's like, he's on a 1-1 deal, right? Like, Elias Sanchez is not a long-term solution.
Yeah.
Paired with like this kind of destroyer 6 that I think a lot of people would like to see, who's also super young and learning and can develop, is the kind of thing that you want to have for long-term success for this club.
Yeah, and that very much feels like what it is. Like, yeah, having a guy like Ilya come in and not just teach him, but teach Owen and Danny and have those guys learn from him. And then in a year or 2 years, potentially have him kind of pass the torch to one of these guys. Like, yeah, this is what it's supposed to look like. And I hope Austin FC is finally getting that part of it right and kind of moving guys through the system in the way that has been proven to work.
Yeah, and so before we take our next break, I feel like this is definitely the week when Austin became a big boy club. We talked about the Driussi holdout being a thing that happens in a lot of places and hasn't happened here. It's sort of a negative part of that. We've talked about like adding Brendan Vazquez, which is the most high-profile signing up front that this club has ever had, being a part of that. And it feels like this is the same way. You know, it's another, like, this is showing maturation of this club as an organization, and it's really, really positive as fans, and hopefully leads you to believe that like Austin's positioning itself for like a long-term success and like a project that has intention and strategy behind it. And if this is all true, then Burrell deserves a ton of credit for what he's done in a relatively short amount of time still to build this.
Another thing I'm excited about here is we've heard in press stuff and on videos that the players always have nicknames for each other. And it often seems like it's just the shortest thing possible that you can yell at someone on the field and get their attention. So his name is Nicolas. Nico would be the obvious thing. We already have Nico as the coach. And then Dubersarsky, they're not going to be yelling Dubersarsky on the field, which makes me think there's potential to have a guy nicknamed either Duber or Doobie on the team, and that could be a lot of fun.
I love that too. All right, well, I think it's probably time to take a break. We're going to talk to Seth on the other side of this, but before that, we have an interesting roster construction mechanism that Tom Bogert tweeted recently about. And then we also have a couple of other bits of Austin FC news. And then again, we'll have the interview with Seth. So if y'all will hang tight, we will be back on the other side. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in Tinamala cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and support Austin FC's start to the preseason and hopefully eventual march to the playoffs. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. Okay, we are back. We have three things in this segment alone that in a different week would have maybe been the lead story, and now they're 5th, 6th, 7th booking. But let's get into this Tom Bogert report that, again, came out within the last couple of hours before we started recording. Bogert is reporting that MLS is going to implement a new internal cash trade system. What does that mean? So you've heard us talk about trading GAM, trading players. Within MLS, that is the only way you could change players between a club, is you either had to give up some of your general allocation money or you had to give them a player. You could not pay a transfer fee like we did for Brandon Vazquez, like we might do for Uzuni, like we might do for Dubersarsky. We would not be able to do that for a player from another team. We'd have to give them a player or we'd have to give them GAM. Bogert is reporting that MLS is going to start allowing teams to pay cash for other MLS players. And so the only details that he gave were it would be up to 2 players brought in via this mechanism and up to 2 players sold via this mechanism. So there's still some limits. I'm sure we're going to get some more details about this through the next days, weeks. So we'll dive into this a bit more in the future. Another part of his report was that sources are telling him that Lucho Acosta from FC Cincinnati, who is also in Argentina, refusing to come back, trying to force a move away, and Evander, who is upset at Portland and is trying to get a move away. Tom Bogert says his sources are saying that that clubs are going to try to go after these 2 guys with this new mechanism. And so these are guys who would not be, like, these are untradeable guys, right? There's a certain level of player that there's not enough GAM, there's not enough players that any team would ever accept a trade for them. But if you get into the scenario where you can pay cash and bring them in as a DP, that becomes realistic. Why do I bring this up? It's because we got something wrong on the show last week. And we were talking about the sale of Sebastian Driussi. We'd be able to turn some of that into GAM. A friend of the show, Long Cow, was doing some digging and found some wording in the roster rules in the CBA. And he wasn't sure you could actually sell a designated player and turn that money into GAM. So we started reaching out. People started trying to figure it out. I asked Tom Bogert on the SoccerWise live stream, and he didn't know. Someone got a hold of roster rules legend Paul Tenorio of The Athletic on Blue Sky. And he answered this. And he said that, yes, you can convert the sale of a DP into GAM, but you first have to recoup all of your costs that you put into that player. So it's not only transfer fee, but I think like any additional fees or costs that went into signing that player all have to be recouped by the team before you can turn any of that into GAM. So for Driussi, he estimated that we'd have to be getting to like the 11, 12, $13 million transfer fee range before any of it turns into GAM, meaning it's unlikely. But this new cash, like internal cash trade system, if we sold Driussi to River for $7, $8, $9 million, whatever, we can't turn that into GAM, but we can put it into Anthony Precourt's bank account. And then with this new system, he can go and try to sign another MLS player for cash. Acosta looks like he wants to be in Argentina. A guy like Evander seems like he just wants to be out of Portland.
Yeah, he seems like he wants to be in the league, but just not there. And would Anthony Precourt use his? He would also save on fee-free banking from Amplify too. I don't know if he uses that or not, but like there's some extra money available if he does that.
But I mean, imagine if we were able to sell Driussi, flip that money into a cash trade for Evander, and have Evander serving in balls to Brandon Vazquez. Like, imagine that. It's wish casting at this point, but it's possible. Like, this is not beyond the realm of belief. This is a thing that could happen. It probably won't, but it could.
It would be amazing if it did. That would really unlock the missing piece in terms of this offense and way to make the best use out of Vazquez.
All right, let's get into the last couple of pieces of miscellaneous news. So we got Austin FC's preseason schedule. Do you want to run through some of the highlights of that?
Yeah, I'll cover that. So there's 7 preseason matches. We've got 2 in Florida, 1 at ING Academy against the Revolution on the January 21st, Charleston Battery on the 24th in Clearwater. We have a return against Louisville City at Q2. Then we have the previously published Coachella Valley Invitational, so that's the 5th, 8th, and 12th of February. And then a match at home against Nashville at Q2 Stadium on February 15th. Neither of the matches in Austin are open to the public. The Florida matches aren't open to the public. The Coachella Valley ones are, and those will probably be streamed. So not a lot of options there. And also we get no St. David's Performance Center matches. So there are no Verde Hill games among the preseason schedule. So that is something I don't think it's ever happened before, right? We've had at least one at home, and there's always the possibility too, right? I feel like there's this. Well, I don't know, maybe not. If the last one's on the 15th and the season starts on the 22nd, maybe there's not an opening. But I feel like in past years we've gotten like sort of a friendly in between what was announced and then what actually came to pass. So that's the schedule for us. Also, I don't know, man. When you're reading everything into everything, I thought the AFC 80s retro style graphic they used in that one, I'm also like, does this inform something about the jersey, or am I reading too much into this? Also,
we didn't even get into jersey leaks, did we?
Yeah, we didn't get into jersey leaks. I don't think we should go into them in detail right now. I think it's something we can save for next week. But we saw a lot of jersey stuff this week. But yeah, that's sort of how the preseason stands. I want to make sure that everybody sort of saw that and knew about that. And then we also got this news in the last couple of days that Danny Pereira gets another call up to the Venezuelan national team for a friendly against the U.S., right?
Yeah. And this is it's not the full strength Venezuela squad either. So there's a decent chance Danny's going to get some playing time in this one.
Yep. So he's made 5 total appearances for Venezuela. But he'll get another one there. And then also our friend Hector Jimenez, who at one point was rumored to be negotiating a possible return to Austin as a player, got announced on Wednesday that he was going to be an assistant coach for Chicago Fire FC for Greg Berhalter, which sort of given the history there, it's not surprising at all. So he joins the Fire's assistant coach after finishing a 14-year career as a player, retired as a 3-time MLS Cup champion with the Galaxy and once with the Crew, and holds a USSF B license. So good for Hector to find a place to land.
Yeah, it's exciting to see, I don't know, just a guy like that, just a real professional, always a favorite in the locker room, always showing up, working hard, doing what he could to help the team. And now he's going to be doing that as a coach and hopefully can help other people have great careers as well. But yeah, congrats to Hector. Good luck on your first season coaching.
Are you ready to go into the interview with Seth? I feel like we've covered all the news that we need to cover this week. Like I said, like we talked about some of these things we can hold for next week or for the future. I'm sure we'll have another Driussi segment next week, but yeah, I mean, it's been a busy one, so maybe we'll move on to the interview and then wrap it up.
Yeah, let's set up who Seth is, because I don't think we did that in the interview. If you're involved in supporters group stuff at all, you probably already know who Seth is. But if you're not, Seth, very involved in supporters group stuff, primarily with travel. Very good at organizing away travel, makes Austin FC away days a good experience. And oftentimes Seth has a lot to do with it being a good experience. So he's also just one of these guys who just knows everything seemingly. And so when it comes to a topic with a lot of details that you have to remember, having a guy like Seth on is very good for someone like me. So we're going to talk to Seth about the schedule release and some of the highlights and news of the Austin FC schedule. All right, we are back. We are thrilled to be joined by Austin FC away day travel guru, Seth Rau. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. We know you have been traveling and we've had to reschedule with you multiple times due to shows that were too full. this show's probably too full too, but we couldn't push you back anymore. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us from a hotel room in Indianapolis.
No, happy to be here. Happy to make it all work. And you know what? It's really good that we actually have news to report on with this team and that we're not in a lull over the offseason. So I'll take that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you can appreciate that talking about the schedule release is not the biggest news of the week, and can be happy about that as we are.
Absolutely.
All right. So I always appreciate you coming on and doing this for us, because my brain works in such a way that looking at a calendar or at a list of games, it all just like slips off of my brain and I can't actually comprehend any of it. And I know, Seth, you have a brain that can look at this and pull trends and interesting points and then synthesize those and give them back to others. So yeah, let's start off with just like the basics. What are like our first match, our last match, and then kind of the bare bone basics of this schedule this year.
So I try to look at the schedule as an overall trend, and then I'll get into what you went there. So this year, it's a little more balanced than it's been in the past few years. So the last 2 seasons, we had 29 teams in MLS. So the West only had 14 teams, and the East had 15 teams. As a result, in each of the last 2 seasons, we've played 3 matches against FC Dallas and against Houston. This year, with San Diego FC joining the league, we are back to 15 and 15. So that means that we will play each of the 14 other teams in the West home and away, and then we will play 3 matches against teams from the East at home, and then 3 matches from teams from the East away. So that's the first thing that I look for in a schedule every year, is who are going to be new matchups, who are going to be exciting matchups. I think a lot of us are really excited about San Diego FC coming into the league. I can tell you, as the person who coordinates our away travel survey, we had more people interested in going to San Diego than going to Frisco or for Houston for the matches that are in-state, and by a pretty significant margin.
Yeah, you would have covered that. Let's just pick that game out of the schedule, because I think I was also one of those people. So that one, because I know people look kind of first at destination, and then you have to look at timing. And this one is what? It's on a Saturday, right? It's like the perfect place people want to go, and it's like convenient for most everybody.
Yes, it is convenient. We have a relatively affordable hotel. I mean, San Diego is obviously expensive, and it's also end of May, which is a cooler time of year there with their June gloom that's setting in. And it's also at the part of the year where it's starting to get really hot in Austin and people want to get out of town. So I think that worked out really well. One thing I really like about this schedule, last 2 seasons with having 29 teams, it meant that it took 37 to 38 match days to play 34 match days, because you always had to have at least one, if not more, teams on buys.
Oh, right.
Because you have 30 teams, that means there is no random Saturdays where we're not playing outside of international breaks or things like that. So there's far fewer midweek matches in this schedule as initially planned than there have been in the past. Also, with Leagues Cup now getting moved to weekdays as well, that there will be a lot more weekday matches that come in through whatever U.S. Open Cup, hopefully the first team is in, and whatever form of Leagues Cup that is still a little bit unclear to us. But in terms of MLS regular season, I believe you only have 4 Wednesday matches.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really nice. And yeah, you mentioned all the weird stuff. It is very nice to know, now that we have the teams, even teams in both conferences. We had Nashville jumping back and forth between conferences for a while, and just like making do with what they had as they awaited for the expansion schedule to finally end after being delayed after COVID, and then finally finding that 30th team. We finally have this balance, and it is going to start to make a bit more sense. Something else that I think makes more sense this year as opposed to last year, or maybe the last 2 years, where kickoff times due to the Apple TV schedule were pretty much always the same time. It's 7:30 local, no matter what, very few exceptions. That's not going to be the case this year, and I think a lot of fans will be happy about that. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what has changed in that regard?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really glad Apple has done is that last 2 seasons we had, yes, there were occasionally matches on Saturday or Sunday afternoons, but the vast majority of matches were at 7:30 p.m. local time. This time, especially outside in the summer, it looks a little bit like that. But for the months except for July and August, Apple is putting in 2 standalone matches on Saturday afternoon, and then 2 standalone matches on Sunday, and some weeks there's even 3 or 4. So it looks a lot more like a Premier League or an NFL schedule. It's not as always consistent on exactly it's going to be like 2:30 or 4:30 on a Saturday, but the Saturday afternoon matches will always end before the East Coast 6:30 matches start for us in the Central Time Zone. And on Sunday, they can be a little bit all over the place, but you're actually going to be able to watch a lot of MLS teams, even if you are at the match, home or away, or watching it on Apple TV, which is far better than it's been in the past. Like, I
Yeah.
look in March right now, and we have a stretch for 3 weeks in March where we play a Saturday afternoon game in LA, a Sunday afternoon home game against San Diego, and then a Sunday afternoon game at St. Louis. So that's 3 weeks in a row where we do not play at 7:30 local time on a Saturday.
Yeah, it's been really frustrating not being able to watch that much of the league because they were staggered because of the time zones. But if Austin's playing at home, I'm usually still driving to the stadium by the time even the first games are kicking off. And so it will be nice to be able to keep tabs on the league a bit better instead of just watching highlights or reading articles, to actually watch a few more games.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be an improvement. It's still not as far as I would like them to go, but there is still trying to figure out how do you balance this all out. There were certain teams, like Toronto FC was very adamant. They're like, you are giving us before Memorial Day, you are giving us daytime Saturday home games or daytime Sunday home games because it is just too cold to be in Toronto by the lake in March or April. Like, there are certain teams that are coming together here, and that especially the northern teams, where there's like 7:30 matches in Chicago, where I now live, in March at Soldier Field, is not an ideal setup. And even if we look at it from the Austin perspective here, like, a lot of people love to bring their kids to day games. They don't want to bring their kids to a 7:30 game.
Yeah.
Having a 3 o'clock game against San Diego at home, the LA Galaxy game, April 19th, is a 12:30 kickoff at home. And I think we might have, I'm scrolling through this here. No, those are the only 2 that we have, but 2 is more than 1 than we had last year. So incremental progress here. And obviously, like, once it hits May in Austin, we really don't want to have Saturday day games. Or Sunday day games. That's a little too hot.
Yeah.
No, and I think you touched on this too, but like the Copa Tejas format will be not absurd again, since we'll have two matches against both.
No division or fractions involved this time.
But this is also the 5th year in a row that the last Copa Tejas match for us is at Frisco. Like, I don't know how this has gotten possible. Like, there's a few schedule oddities I'll call out here. Like, I was fully prepared for the Eastern. It's like, okay, we have played. There are 2 teams in the Eastern Conference that have never come to Q2 Stadium before this year, Atlanta and New England. Both of them are on the schedule coming to Austin this year, which is pretty cool. Atlanta actually got one of those Wednesday games, which is kind of disappointing because they usually travel really well. Atlanta provides all of their, not just their supporter section ticket holders, but all of their season ticket holders with free tickets to away matches. So if that had been a weekend match, they might have run into some space constraints, because it's not like, even with the form and team, like, Q2 is still pretty full, and it's pretty hard to get more than 200 away seats in the section there. Away, I was fully expecting us to get 3 new Eastern Conference away opponents this year, and we are going to FC Cincinnati for the first time ever, which, as someone who grew up in Cincinnati, is pretty exciting, and it should be a fun match. But we're also going back to DC and Montreal, places that we had amazing times in 2022, and highly recommend those trips. But I was surprised that we got those as repeat away days before going to Chicago, Philly, NYCFC, or to Columbus, in that case, which has now been 5 years. And we have still yet to play the Chicago Fire in a regular MLS season match. We did play them in the Open Cup, but in 5 years, 2 teams not playing each other in league play is quite silly and nearly should be impossible.
Yeah, I talking about Montreal, that is one that's been on my list of just like not really soccer destinations, but like a city I would like to visit. And there's a soccer game there too. Great. And I just haven't been able to make it work. So I was kind of happy to see that repeat. I know some people who have gone and wanted some variety, maybe wanted to see something different, but selfishly, I'm happy to see that one on there to get another chance to go.
Yeah, no, Montreal is amazing. Montreal is one of my favorite cities in North America, even as someone who's not a French speaker. If I can make it with my schedule, I'll probably be up there. We actually got a hotel block that should be going live this week, and I got the hotel block for both San Diego and for Montreal to extend, I think, 3 days before the 3 days before the weekend and 3 days after the weekend for San Diego and 2 days before and after for Montreal. So you can get hotel rooms for under $200 a night in city centers on public transit lines that can allow you to go out, explore the restaurants, explore the neighborhoods, explore the museums. And Montreal in late August is amazing.
Well, I want to talk.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, before we get into that, I was thinking about the All-Star game is also in Austin this year at Q2 on Wednesday, July 23rd. I've never been to an All-Star game. I don't know if you have, Seth, or not, but like what can people expect about that as far as like, do people travel for it? What does the experience look like? We know that, I believe this to be true, season ticket holders get the first right to buy their seats, but it is not included in the package, which is probably an important thing for people who listen or season ticket holders to know. So like, talk about the All-Star game a little bit too.
Yeah, the All-Star game is something, honestly, I haven't put much thought into. I might come down for it, but we'll see what my work schedule and everything else looks like. But I'm actually more excited about the skills challenge the day before the All-Star game. Like the All-Star quality of play in the All-Star game, I don't think it's been 100% confirmed that it's MLS All-Stars against Liga MX All-Stars, but that's what it's been most of the last few years. A couple years ago, they played Arsenal at Audi Field in DC, and that just didn't really make sense. Like even Arsenal's like A-B team is going to beat up on the MLS All-Stars.
Yeah.
And there were some rumors when Fernando Perez was in Austin last year. It's like maybe Real Madrid is going to come in and play in the All-Star game. And like on the one hand, that would be kind of cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, we'd get crushed. The one big exciting thing is obviously if Messi is healthy, that does mean you could potentially have Lionel Messi playing at Q2. That being said, we also have a Club World Cup this summer. We have Leagues Cup. We have a lot of matches. He's only just getting older. So I think it's a 50-50 shot if Messi will be here for the All-Star game. I think ticket prices will dramatically vary. I've never been to the MLS All-Star game before. It's usually, they also pair an owners meeting and like a lot of other media events around it. So there's a lot of a circus that is probably pretty productive for you guys as like View Tower hosts and semi-accredited journalists of like getting to go to cool events and things like that. But for the average fan, I would, yes, they're going to want a supporter section to be going and like Dale MLS doesn't hit in the same way. Like there will be a few things there. Like, yes, like if you're in town and the tickets are not that bad, especially if you're season ticket holders that will get the right to buy at face value, this could be your chance to see some really cool athletes. I would recommend going, but I would also definitely tell you to go to the skills challenge, watch goalie wars, watch crossbar challenge, watch amazing athletes do things that you're never going to see them do otherwise. So I may very well fly in for the skills challenge and then sell my ticket, especially if Messi is playing in the actual All-Star game, and make a few bucks on that.
Before we wrap up, we've already mentioned quite a few away matches. Are there any other away day highlights that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, so I mean, we've already brought up San Diego. I think San Diego is going to be our largest away day, one of our largest away days in a while. I mean, when we went to DC in 22 and had the Miracle of Pollo, where we came back from 2-0 down in the 80th minute, that we had over 250 people in that away section. We have a lot of Verdes who, not just members of Los Verdes, but members of our fan base that live in DC. Just Austin is being a political city. We have lots of people who are expats or vice versa in DC. So yeah, it's
also.
July. Yeah.
Great friend of the Cottam Gill household, Exiles Bar, where all of the Austin FC fans partied before and after the game, is owned by someone who was in the Peace Corps with my wife, and we go on vacation with them every year. And that was just kind of a random thing through Seth, Aaron Conrado.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That was the link there, but it was accidental, and we found out about it on Instagram when people were posting videos tagging Exiles Bar. I'm like, that's Brian's bar.
You know what? This world is a small place. I mean, I kind of wish that match, as much as I talked about San Diego and Montreal being at ideal timings of the year, going to DC in late July is not, especially 3 days after the All-Star game, is not much better than being in Austin, frankly. Might be a few degrees colder, but I still think we'll have a good contingent for that match. We open at Portland. One thing I will plug here is that Los Verdes does run all of the away ticketing, but you don't have to be a Los Verdes or Anthem or Pollo or Murga member to go in through the away section. You just have to be willing to support the team, and you can buy through the portal. If you go to store.losverdesatx.org/tickets, that we already have 9 matches where we have tickets for sale right now, and I'm sure it'll be in the show notes as well. But yeah, you can already buy tickets for the Portland match, the LAFC match, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Colorado, DC, Kansas City. I just added that today when we're recording, so it'll be tomorrow. And then there's much of Salt Lake and San Jose. And then the other matches, aside from the in-state matches against FC Dallas and Houston, will be added there in the next few weeks. And the other ones take a little longer because of busing logistics. And also, FC Dallas might be a tough ticket this year because they're renovating their stadium. And stadium capacity is down to about half of its previous size. I don't know what they're going to do with their Toyota trucks there during the renovation, but we'll have to see.
They got to keep the trucks, Seth. They got to keep them.
Or maybe they expand and have more trucks during the renovation.
I've always said I want them to do like a Roman Coliseum thing and have trucks lining the roof of the stadium so that they're like looking down on the field, and maybe even have the headlights of the trucks be like the stadium lights.
You know what? But the nice thing is, once they finish this renovation in 2027, the stadium will actually have a roof, so maybe it will be breathable to be out there on a summer evening, unlike what it has been in past years.
Yeah. All right. Well, Seth, thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down and helping it make sense in a way that will actually stick in my brain. We always appreciate it, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you on the road at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Always happy to come on here as well. I'm always doing a little bit of my own analysis, not as good as you guys, with my friends at Suffering from Joy. So we sometimes are cross-promoting materials over there, and you can always find me. If you're in Los Verdes or Anthem, you can find me on the Slacks or Discord or Twitter, Blue Sky, ralseth@gmail.com. I don't think I'm a hard person to reach, and I'll probably get back to you if you have any questions about away travel. And I'm always impressed with the last 2 years I've done this. I've had people reach out from all sorts of worlds that are interested in joining us on the road, and would love to hear from new folks.
All right. Well, Seth, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right. We want to thank Seth one more time. I think that's all. Before we finish, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet, on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube sometimes. And then sign up for the Patreon. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week to cover whatever. News. And at this rate, it could be anything, honestly. And then, talk about anything else that happens. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothing, you never.
La gente. Oh my God.